Hello, fourth grade, and welcome to Unit 2, Week 5. This is the last week of Unit 2. After this, we're going to jump into Unit 3. Now, for this week, you only have 4 vocabulary words, but you also have 4 poetry-related words. So those are going to be what we're going to go over today. I'm going to go over the vocabulary words first, and then your spelling words, and then we'll jump into the poetry words. Now, your first vocabulary word for this week is the word brittle. Something that is brittle can be broken very easy. So glass can be very brittle. So if you think of like a snow globe, right? It's got really thin, very fragile, very breakable glass. Your next word is the word outstretched. So if something is outstretched, it's being held out. So if you have your arms outstretched, you're holding your arms out. If you have your legs outstretched, you've got your legs stretched out. Your next word is the word creative. So something that is creative shows originality, right? Or someone who is creative is creates some beautiful pictures or some very original pieces of work that are different than what most people make. So we can say the boy made a creative diorama, or the girl painted a very creative picture of her family. And your last vocabulary word is the word descriptive. So something that is descriptive comes from the word describe. So if something is descriptive, it helps to describe the thing, or it helps you to paint a picture of whatever that thing is, but using your words. So when you're using very descriptive language, the person that you're talking to is able to imagine what it is fairly easily. Now, your spelling words for this week are going to focus on suffixes. So remember, we've talked about suffixes already. They're the word parts that get added onto the end of a word. So the suffixes that you guys have this week are ly, L-Y, full, F-U-L, nis, N-E-S-S, less, L-E-S-S, E-S-T, like est or E-R. So we'll talk about all those in a minute. So your words for this week are the word sickly, hardly, quickly, slowly, carefully, wonderful, beautiful, graceful, spoonful, darkness, shapeless, ageless, illness, goodness, spotless, painless, weakness, darkest, clearest, thoughtful, door, smart, argue, brilliantly, and straightest. Now, if you notice, if you pay really close attention, you'll see that some of these words have more than one suffix attached to them. So if you look at the word carefully, it has the full and the ly. So the word carefully tells you that something is done in a way that has a lot of care in it. So we're going to talk more about those suffixes in just a minute and what they mean and how to use them. Now, to jump into those notes, the prefixes we talked about last week, re, un, and dis, I'll leave the notes here for you to review. Now, other suffixes other than full and list that we talked about are going to be suffixes like al, something that is relating to something. So something that is historical is related to something in history, something that is natural is related to something in nature, and so on. Er, when we add that as a suffix, not as a comparative, but when we're adding it just as a suffix, it tells us that that person does something or they perform something. So a helper is someone who helps. A teacher is someone who teaches. A preacher is someone who preaches. A dancer is someone who dances. So er on the end of a noun tells you that that person does or they take part in that thing. Now you have also the suffix ion that sounds like shun, which I know sounds like it's got an sh in it, even though it doesn't. So that suffix means the action or the process of doing something. So a celebration is when you are in the process of celebrating something. A decision is when you're in the process or you're making an action, you're deciding something. A revision is when you are revising something. Now, OR, so we talked about ER being someone who does that thing. OR is a person who is that thing or does that thing. So a distributor is someone who distributes or gives things out. An investigator is someone who investigates. A translator is someone who translates. A conductor is someone who conducts. And the last suffix we're going to talk about today is able, A-B-L-E, meaning that you are able to do that thing. So you're capable of being, or you're able to do that same thing. So something that is preventable is capable of being prevented or stopped. If an animal is adaptable, it is capable of adapting, or it's able to adapt. Something that is predictable can be predicted. Something that is acceptable can be accepted. So those are some of the common ones that you've already used in your reading and writing, and this just helps you to get a better understanding of what it means. So when you come across words that have these different suffixes, you can use that information to help you understand what the word means if you're not sure. Now we're going to also talk about contractions. Contractions are things that you've been learning about for a couple of years now, 4th grade. A contraction combines two words into one smaller word, and it leaves out at least one or more of the letters. Now the first word usually stays the same, and the second word is usually the word that's shortened. So we put an apostrophe in the place of the letters that are removed when we take two words and we make a contraction out of them. So some of the examples of your most common contractions are below. When you're adding the word not to something, so do not becomes don't. The word not, we pull out the O and we replace that O with an apostrophe T. So when you're adding not to something, you have your base word, your first word, and then an apostrophe T. So do not becomes don't, or will not becomes won't. She and will. So when you're adding the word will to your first word, you're taking out the WI and you're putting an apostrophe in their place. But having it spelled W-I-L-L, when it becomes a contraction, it just becomes apostrophe L-L. So she will becomes she'll. Now, if you're adding the word am to a word, you're going to take out the A and you're going to put an apostrophe in place of the A and keep the letter M. So I am because I'm becomes I'm. When you're adding is to a word, you take out the I and you replace the I with an apostrophe. And so it becomes, it becomes apostrophe S. So he is becomes he's, she is becomes she's, and so on. Now, when you're adding the word are to a word, so like you are or they are, you take the A out of the word are and you replace that A with the apostrophe. So it becomes apostrophe RE that you're sticking on to the end of that first word. So you are becomes your, they are becomes their, and so on. So the rules over here are in parentheses on the far right. It'll tell you exactly what you're going to be adding to the end of your first word when you're creating a contraction with these words. Now, our literary elements for this week. So these are the poetry words that I told you about in the beginning when we were talking about our vocabulary. We're going to talk about meter. Now, meter is the official definition of meter is it's the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. So meter is made up of two parts, the number of syllables and the pattern of emphasis. So what does that mean? That means like the beat. So which syllables are you hearing more strongly? Which syllables are you hearing more softly? We're going to talk about rhyme, and we know that rhyme means that words have the same ending sound. So when they have the same ending sound, we say those words rhyme, like cat and bat or mouse and house. We're going to talk about two different kinds of poems, which are lyric poems. Now, lyric poems show the thoughts or the feelings of the writer, and they have a consistent meter and rhyme. So it's not changing. It's following the same pattern throughout the entire poem. Now, a haiku is a unique poem that's very different from a lot of our regular poems because it's very short It's only 3 lines long, and it's describing one single thing. So it's not talking about a whole event or your whole day or a whole experience. It's talking about one single scene or one single moment. So the first and the last lines each have 5 syllables, and the second line has 7 syllables. So the pattern it follows is 5, 7, 5. That's it. There's no extra stanzas. Your haiku is just those 3 lines. Now, a rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhymes in each line of the poem or each verse of the poem. So if, for example, if everything rhymes, it'll be like A. So cat, hat. If every other line rhymes, they write it as A, B. So A, B, A, B. So the first A and the second A match, the first B and the second B match, and they kind of, it's like taking turns. So I can say the cat in the house and the bat chased the mouse, for example. I know that doesn't make sense as a poem, but you can see that every other line is rhyming. Or you can have, for example, every 2 lines rhyme, so A, B, and so on. So these are just examples. And a stanza is a group of lines in a poem, just like we have paragraphs when we're doing our regular writing. A stanza is like a paragraph, but for poetry. So it's a group of lines that talk about the same thing. Just like when we write a paragraph, that paragraph is a group of lines that talk about the same thing. All right, and the last, or one of the last things we're going to talk about today is figurative language. So we're going to talk about similes and metaphors. Now, both similes and metaphors are comparing 2 things that are not the same. You need to be able to identify, this is very important, you need to be able to identify what the things that are being compared are. So you need to know, what are we comparing? I'm comparing this thing to that thing. Now, a metaphor compares 2 unlike things by saying that one thing is the other thing. So you're using is or was or are or things like that, different variations of the word is. So the snow was a white blanket on the grass. So what am I comparing here? I'm comparing the snow to a blanket. Her eyes are sky blue. I'm comparing her eyes to the sky. Life is a roller coaster. I'm comparing life to a roller coaster. So I'm using different variations of the word is. The calm lake surface was a mirror. So was is going to be my clue word that's telling me one thing is basically the other thing. I'm going to underline this for you guys. So here I'm comparing the lake to a mirror. So remember, a metaphor says one thing is the other thing. A simile is different. A simile tells you that one thing is like the other thing, and it uses the words like or the word as. So these are the 2 words that you're going to look for, and these are going to tell you that it's a simile. So if I say I ran as fast as a cheetah, I'm comparing myself, the writer, right, to a cheetah, I and the cheetah. If I say the boy is as quiet as a mouse, so I'm comparing the boy to a mouse. If I say you were as brave as a lion, I'm comparing you to a lion. If I say her hands were as cold as ice, I'm comparing her hands to ice. So you need to make sure that you can identify exactly what's being compared. That's very important, and that's something that you're going to be asked about repeatedly throughout your assignments. So again, just to review, metaphors say one thing is the other thing. Similes compare the 2 things by using either the word like or the word as. So if you're not sure, look for one of these words in there, and you'll know which one you're dealing with. Now, we're also going to talk about combining sentences. Now, we're either combining the subjects or the predicate nouns. So the subject nouns or the predicate nouns. Now, when we have different subject nouns, we're going to combine those subject nouns and keep the same ending for the sentence. When we're combining the predicate nouns, we're keeping all the information that's in the beginning and we're combining the nouns that are in the predicate. So if I say Sara has a cat, Omar has a cat, I can say Sara and Omar have cats. So one of the things you need to pay attention to when you are combining sentences is you need to make sure the verb in your sentence agrees. Now, in this case, the verb is has. So I use the word has when I'm talking about one thing. Sara has, Omar has, he has, she has. But when I'm talking about more than one thing or more than one subject, or I'm talking about the word I use have. So I have, they have, we have. It's either talking about a group or it's me talking about myself. I have to change it to the word have. So has talks about one thing, have talks about more than one thing. I can say Hamza goes to school, Zahra goes to school. But when I combine them, I say Hamza and Zahra go to school. I don't say Hamza and Zahra goes to school because goes is referring to one. He goes, she goes. But if it's more than one, I say we go or they go. So pay attention to that. Make sure that your verb matches the sentence. So a lot of times you're going to have to change that verb to make sure it matches the sentence. Now, if we're combining the predicate nouns in a sentence, that means the first part of the sentence is the same and the noun or the thing that's going to change in our sentence is in the predicate, in the second part of the sentence. So again, we're going to combine them using the word and we're going to kind of kick off any words that repeat. So I'm going to show you what that would look like. So over here, when I was talking about my subject nouns, instead of saying Sara has a cat, Omar has a cat, I'm going to take out, right, that first part and replace it with the word and. So Sara and Omar have cats. Instead of Hamza goes to school, Zahra goes to school, I'm going to take out this repeat and say Hamza and Zahra go to school. Now, same thing over here. At the park, we saw puppies. At the park, we saw kittens. So I'm going to take out the repeat over here and replace it with the word and. At the park, we saw puppies and kittens. Our next example sentence says, the seagulls ate crabs, the seagulls ate fish. So I'm going to take out this second repeat, and I'm going to say the seagulls ate crabs and fish. So whenever you combine a sentence, you're going to have a complete subject and a complete predicate in order for it to be a complete sentence. You're also going to take out the repeating words and you're going to replace them with and, or sometimes you might replace them with or. So if I was going to use the word or, I can say, do you want to eat pizza or do you want to eat pizza? Do you want to eat spaghetti? And I can put those together and say, do you want to eat pizza or spaghetti? Follows the same rule. You're taking out the repeating words and you're replacing them with one word, either and or. And the last bit that we're going to talk about are called phrases and interjections. Now, an introductory phrase is a group of words that comes before the main part of a sentence, and it is a dependent clause. Now, a dependent clause means it doesn't have a subject and a verb of its own to make it a complete sentence or an independent clause. Remember, independent means it's good all by itself. You don't need to add anything to it. But a dependent clause needs more. It doesn't tell you enough. So an introductory phrase is a kind of dependent clause that comes before the main part of the sentence. And it helps the reader to understand more about the main part of the sentence or the main clause. So an introductory phrase is not a complete sentence because it doesn't have a subject and a verb of its own. Now, it may have a subject or a verb, but not both. So when we're writing an introductory phrase, we always put a comma after the introductory phrase. And I'll give you a couple examples. So I can say in the very beginning of the story, comma, a boy meets a stray dog. Now, I can take out that introductory phrase altogether, and the rest of it, the main clause or the main part of the sentence, is a complete thought. If I just said a boy meets a stray dog, that's a complete sentence. But that introductory phrase tells me more. It gives me extra information. So in the very beginning of the story, comma, a boy meets a stray dog. Another example sentence. Along the way to my friend's house, comma, I saw several rose bushes in bloom. Now again, that second part can stand alone as a sentence by itself, but the first part gives us additional information about it. Opening the door to my friend, comma, I discovered that she was not alone. Having finished his lunch, comma, Sam went back to work on his art project. So all of these are basically providing you with extra information about the main part of the sentence. So they're introducing the main part of the sentence by telling you more things about it. Now, the next kind of thing that we're going to talk about are called appositives. So an appositive is a noun that describes the noun that comes right before it. What does that look like? What does that sound like? So an appositive is separated from the rest of the sentence with a comma before it and after it. So it's usually thrown in the middle of a sentence. It has the first part of the sentence, then a comma, then we have the appositive, then we have another comma, and then we have the tail end of the sentence. So appositives are basically your bonus information. They're extra information to tell you more about the noun in your sentence. So if I say Hermione Granger, a witch at Hogwarts School, is accomplished at spells. Now, my appositive phrase here is a witch at Hogwarts School. The main part of the sentence is Hermione Granger is accomplished at spells, right? I can pull that whole appositive phrase out and my sentence is still complete. But by having it in there, I'm telling my reader more information about the subject of my sentence, right? My noun in my sentence, who is Hermione Granger. So an appositive phrase gives you extra information. It's surrounded by commas, right? A comma before it and a comma after it. And if you take it out, it doesn't affect the sentence. It doesn't make the sentence not a sentence anymore. Another example is my childhood friend, Anne Marie, loved horses. So I can take out the name altogether. I can say my childhood friend loved horses. But by giving you the name, I've now renamed my noun, right? I've given you extra information about who my friend is. I've given a name to my friend. I can take that out again, right? I can say my childhood friend loved horses, but by adding that appositive phrase, by adding that extra information, you as the reader now have more, or you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So just to review, appositives are extra information in the middle of a sentence that give more information about the noun that came right before it. So Hermione Granger is my noun. The appositive phrase came right after it, a witch at Hogwarts School. My childhood friend is the noun that I'm talking about. Anne Marie is the appositive that came right after it. Now, the last bit that we're going to talk about are called interjections. Now, interjections express a strong emotion, and they usually have an exclamation point after them. So it's usually just a word or phrase. So the etymology of the word interjection. Interjection comes from a Latin word, and it's broken into different parts. So we have the prefix inter, which means between, and the main part of the word, which is jacere, which means to throw. So an interjection is a word that you're throwing in between sentences or thoughts to express a feeling. So it could be excitement, it could be fear, it could be joy, anything in there. So I have a couple of examples of them for you here in our examples below. So you can say, yikes, did you see that? So yikes is my interjection. One word, exclamation mark. Or I can say, oh my, I think we're lost. So oh my is my interjection, right? It's showing strong feeling. Or I can say, ouch, that hurt. So ouch is my interjection here. You planned the parody just for me? Wow. So wow is my interjection. Or I forgot my book at school. Whoops. So you can see all of these are ending with an exclamation mark. And they're all just a sudden burst of feeling or thought that you throw in between your sentences to show how you're feeling to the person who's listening or to the person who's reading. All right. Let's jump into our weekly stories, and we've got poetry this week, which is a lot of fun. I hope you guys really enjoy it.
Genre: poetry. The Sandpiper. At the edge of tide, he stops to wonder, races through the lace of thunder. On toothpick legs, swift and brittle, he runs and pipes, and his voice is little. But small or not, he has a notion to outshout the Atlantic Ocean. Francis Frost. Bat. All day, bats drowse in houses' eaves, like tents collapsed for storage. But when dusk darkens, like fall leaves, they loosen. Then they forage. For juicy June bugs, meaty moths, mosquitoes, eaten rare. They're scary, but there's nothing like a bat to clear the air. X.J. Kennedy. Copyright 1985 by X.J. Kennedy. First appeared in The Forgetful Wishing Well, published by Simon & Schuster, reprinted by permission of Curtis Brown, Ltd. The Grasshopper Springs. The grasshopper springs and catches the summer wind with his outstretched wings. James W. Hackett. Fireflies at dusk. Fireflies dance at dusk, tiny lanterns in the dark, lighting my way home. Evelyn Rose.
Okay, so these are our first poems in our literature anthology book, and I want you to pay attention to the poems that you just listened to. So these poems are on this page are haikus. It's describing a single image or a single feeling or a single moment. It's very short. It follows that 5-7-5 rule where it's got 5 syllables in the first one, 7 in the next, and 5 in the last. All right, so we have a couple more poems here, and then we're going to jump into our reading and writing workshop poems.
Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. Carl Sandburg. White Cat Winter. White Cat Winter prowls the farm, tiptoes soft through withered corn, creeps along low walls of stone, falls asleep beside the barn. Tony Johnston.
All right, so that takes us to the end of our poems for our literature anthology book. And now we're going to jump into our readers and writers workshop where you can see the vocabulary words and the poetry terms that we talked about. And we're going to listen to some of our poems here. So this first poem is a haiku.
Genre, poetry. Dog. A brown boomerang. My dog flies off, arcs his way back into my arms. Jeffrey Boyle. The eagle. He clasps the crag with crooked hands. Close to the sun in lonely lands, ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Chimpanzee. From branch to branch on outstretched arms, from tree to ground, I leap. When I want to eat a snack, I stick a stick in termite heaps. I use my teeth to rip off leaves and make the branch all bare. Then find the hole the bugs come out and patiently wait there. My skinny branch becomes a bridge as brittle bugs climb up the stick. I pick them off one by one and crunch them like potato chips. Ellen Lee.
Now for this poem, Chimpanzee, you'll notice the rhyme pattern where we're seeing every other line rhymes. The first and the third line rhyme, the fourth and, or sorry, the fifth and the seventh line rhyme. So leap and heap, bear and there, stick and chips, which doesn't rhyme very well, but you can see that there's a particular rhyme pattern that's going on here. And our last poem in here, called Rat, is also, like the previous poems on the page before, is a type of haiku.
Rat. Teeth like jackhammers, I chew through concrete for fun. Bring the outdoors in. Rosa Sandoval.
All right, so let's go back and review our genres, our genre, which is poetry. And we talked about lyric poetry and haiku. So remember, lyric poetry shows a feeling or thoughts that are being expressed by the poet or by the writer of that poem. And they have a pretty consistent meter and rhyme. So there's a beat to it. So it can be da, 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 where you're hearing higher stressed and unstressed, or it could have da, da, ta, da, da, ta, da, da, ta, where you're hearing low, low, high, low, low, high. So the beat or the meter is that pattern that you're hearing. And it has a consistent rhyme scheme. So either every line rhymes or every other line rhymes, or the first two rhyme and then the next two rhyme. So with lyric poetry, it's very consistent. With haiku, it's really different. It's just 3 lines, single moment, single feeling, very short. It follows a 5-7-5 pattern for the syllables in each line. And we'll take a look at some examples right now.
Lyric poetry and haiku. Lyric poetry expresses the thoughts and feelings of the poet, often has end rhymes and a consistent meter. Haiku uses 3 short lines to describe a scene or a moment, has a first and last line of 5 syllables and a second line of 7 syllables. Find text evidence. The Eagle is a lyric poem because it tells how the poet feels about the eagle. It also has end rhymes and a consistent meter. Dog is a haiku because the lines have the 5-7-5 syllable count. The Eagle. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. Ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. Alfred Lord Tennyson. The poet describes the eagle as close to the sun in lonely lands. From this I can infer that the poet feels the eagle is a regal and noble creature.
We're also going to revisit the point of view. So when we're talking again about the point of view, you're hearing about the speaker's opinion or feeling about something, and they'll usually provide additional details to support that feeling or to tell you why they have that feeling or opinion about something.
Point of view. The voice that you hear in a poem is the speaker. The speaker's point of view is how the speaker thinks or feels. Sometimes the speaker is a character in the poem. Sometimes the speaker is telling about the characters or events in the poem. Find text evidence. In chimpanzee, the pronouns I and me tell me that the speaker is the chimpanzee. I will reread the poem on page 152 and find the details that give me clues to the chimpanzee's point of view. Graphic organizer. Details. When I want to eat a snack, I stick a stick in termite heaps. I use my teeth to rip off leaves. I pick them off one by one. Point of view. The chimpanzee is confident about finding food.
All right, that takes us to the end of our language arts notes for Unit 2, Week 5. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, take care and I'll talk to you soon.